Hello, my name is Yvonne. I will take you through this presentation on whistleblowing. This presentation will cover various aspects and it will also be supported by documentations that talk about the legislation around whistleblowing for the US, Canada, and the UK. We'll first cover the introduction, followed by a comparison of the three definitions of a whistleblower in the three countries, the importance of whistleblowing, different whistleblower protection, and then the differences of the whistleblower protection in the three countries that I just mentioned, together with legal jurisdictional differences, the effectiveness of the three frameworks that we have explored in this research, and then the downside of whistleblowing. And then finally, we will look at a well known whistleblower, Dr. Lee Wulang, who we will talk about later on in the presentation, and finally close it on with a conclusion. So we'll begin with a definition from Nia and Niseli from 1985, as cited by Chen from 2019. So this definition is an existing or former member of an organization discovering illegal, unethical, or irregular behavior in an organization and whistleblowing to an individual or organization that may be affected by the behavior. When you look at whistleblowing, we think about various factors: social, financial, ethical being the of utmost importance. And so these are some of the reasons why whistleblowing may come around. Another word that has been defined in the presentation because it will be used often is wrongdoing. Wrongdoing is when there are several different categories of wrongdoing for which a report or wrongdoing may constitute whistleblowing, such as violations of the law, mismanagement, fraud, waste, abuse of authority, etc. This definition comes from the US Merit Systems Protection Board done in 2010. And so we will look at the range of misconduct that may trigger such a disclosure by the employee and how that varies between the US, UK, and Canada, and looking at how efficient these frameworks are and how the protection of like the whistleblower in the different countries is, and which one may be better, which procedure is easier than the other one, and also looking at legal jurisdictions between the three of them. So as I stated, we will look at the comparisons of the definition. This is pulled from Chalwant, Carrion, Crespo, and Licata in 2019, where it states for the United States, the definition of whistleblowing is the disclosure of information by federal employees or applicants evidencing a violation of law rules or highlighting gross mismanagement, waste, abuse, and public health and safety dangers. So as you can see, this is very similar to the definition of wrongdoing that we discussed in the previous slide. Hence, you can see the similarities in words. And then for the UK, it's a disclosure by workers of malpractice, dangers, legal violations, or other wrongdoings within the organization. And for Canada, it's a disclosure of employees of illegal, immoral, or illegitimate, practices to entities that can effect change. So the differences in definitions also they cover the protections of the witness of the whistleblower. So with this definition, it guides the framework on how it will be executed, basically. So next, we shall look at the importance of whistleblowing, and we'll look at the four importances of whistleblowing: financial, legal, societal, and ethical. So whistleblowing is very important and it covers these four key areas. So when we're looking at the financial importance, it's able to be used as a weapon against corruption It also is able to protect the public resources and encourage investors to invest more due to the organization being deemed as trustworthy. This will also lead into overall economic growth and development. When you look at the legal side of whistleblowing, it is important to protect and maintain the compliance of the laws that govern various businesses and organizations. And it helps the laws become stronger and even new ones to be implemented to ensure that organizations are running the way they should be run. When you look at the societal importance, it's key to mention corporate social responsibility, where companies or organizations a social responsibility, have a responsibility to the society to ensure that whatever they do is not of harm to anyone, like they're not having any negative impact on anyone, be it their direct employees, their stakeholders, which covers a large umbrella, including the customers and even the society as a whole. Um, and then lastly, which is one of the most important pillars, is the ethical importance. So I'll just read what quote from the book cited below. So whistleblowing serves as a fundamental mechanism by which ethical standards and moral behaviors are reinforced by organizations and societies, which really speaks about how when wrongdoing is brought to light, it is able to uphold ethical standards and to ensure that companies and organizations are doing what is morally right to themselves and they're going in accordance with laws and their own company policies. So next we're going to look at the two different types of whistleblowers and then look at the different types of whistleblower protection and compare them within the three countries. So for there are two types of whistleblowing protection. There is internal whistleblowing protection and there's external whistleblowing protection. So internal whistleblowing protection is when for me, like as an employee, I go to my supervisor and report a matter that I have taken the time to research and to gain all the information and follow the right steps of whistleblowing to let them know that there's wrongdoing going on. And so for me as an employee, and I've, I've brought up the whistleblowing within the organization, there's four protections that I have. So one is confidentiality. So by reporting within the organization, confidentiality should remain that I have not brought about any wrongdoing. Next is anti-retaliation measures. So there should be protections against demotion, termination, or harassment for reporting misconduct. Next is investigation guarantees. So as I said, like my supervisor should ensure that a thorough and impartial inquiry on the matter that is allegedly made by me as a whistleblower is properly and thoroughly investigated. Next is feedback mechanism. So I, as a whistleblower, I am entitled to receiving updates about the investigation's progress and the outcome. So the next one is external whistleblowing. So which is, for example, if I have same employee, I know of misconduct that is going on, I know of a wrongdoing that is happening within the organization, and all my efforts of going to like the supervisors are futile. So what I do is I go and report it to an outside body, a regulatory body. So some of the protections that I have are the three that I've mentioned here, um, which is anonymous reporting. It allows me as a whistleblower to report the misconduct to the external authorities or regulatory boards, and while keeping my name confidential, just similar to the first point. And then the second one is investigative obligations. So the regulatory bodies or law enforcement or external authorities are required to investigate the allegations. And then lastly, there's financial rewards. So, for example, in the US, there are laws that um, they that are under the False Claims Act, which may offer monetary incentives for information that has led to a successful, that after the investigation has been done, um, has led to successful legal action for the misconduct that has happened. Yes, and these points have been gotten from the resources that have been cited above. So we have seen the two different types of whistleblowing protections, internal and external. And then next we will explore the differences of the three countries, the UK, Canada, and US. So for the UK, the protected parties are the public sector employees, contractors, temporary employees, consultants, suppliers, and private sector employees. For Canada, it's slightly similar to the UK. It has a public, but also incorporates the private sector employees. So there's the public and private sector employees, contractors, temporary employees, consultants, suppliers, and former employees. Um, so sorry, the only difference is the UK does not also include former employees. And as for the US, employees of publicly trading companies, which is stated in the Sarbanes-Oxley Act of which was done in 2002, and individuals who report securities fraud to the SEC, which is in the Dodd-Frank Act done in 2010. So next, we will explore the jurisdictional differences of the US, the UK, and Canada. So for the US, um, whistleblowing protection, it focuses on federal employees and applicants. It discloses about violations of laws, rules, or significant wrongdoing governed by the Whistleblower Protection Act and requires disclosure in good faith. So when we look at this, we also think about the violation of laws, rules, regulations, gross management, gross waste of funds, authority of abuse, danger to public health or safety. So, which also comes back to when you look at the definition of a whistleblower, whistleblowing for the US, it covers, when you look at now the framework of the protections that are under it, it's very similar to the definition. For the UK, it encourages disclosure about malpractices or legal violations. It emphasizes a tiered reporting system starting internally. So there are steps that have to be taken in order for a report to be made and for you to as a whistleblower to be protected. So if you go outside the tiered reporting system, then your protection is limited or it's null and void. And then it's governed by the Public Interest Disclosure Act, which is on 1998 and requires disclosure in good faith too. And then when we look at the Canadian Whistleblower Protection Framework, it primarily focuses on public sector disclosure, and it addresses illegal and illegitimate practices and aims to balance freedom of expression with loyalty duties. It's governed by the Public Sector Servants Disclosure Protection Act and requires disclosure in good faith. All this is also gotten from the same resource that looks at the definitions and the differences in the definitions. We see that regardless of the framework between all three countries, one thing that is the same is that disclosure is required in good faith. It cannot be done with malice. It is as an employee just bringing about genuine knowledge to authorities or to their superiors about misconduct. So next we look at the um, effectiveness of the three frameworks. So for the three frameworks, for the US, I'd say that connection between disclosure and personnel action is required, and protection via Whistleblower Protection Act and related legislation. While for the UK, as I mentioned, there's a tiered reporting approach. So you have to do it internally before you go externally. So you cannot go to uh, you cannot go to report externally if you have not done it internally. That would mean that you're not entitled to the whistleblower protection that is within the protection under Public Interest Disclosure Act. As for Canada, it balances expression of freedom and a duty of loyalty. And as stated in the previous slide, it mainly focuses on the public sector protection, which is under the Public Servants Disclosure Protection Act. So when we look at the downside of whistleblowing, this is from McDougall, which was done in 2015. So there whistleblowing from this whole presentation, we see that whistleblowing is very important, not only to the employee, not only to the organization, but to the society as a whole. But then there are some downsides to whistleblowing. That's why there's very clear laws that support whistleblowing, and there are specific steps on how to do whistleblowing. This is because there are various things that can happen, like risk of misinformation or misinterpretation. So there's a risk associated with whistleblowing causing the spread of misinformation and if the whistleblower is has not um, taken into consideration all the facts, has not done like good and ample research to support their suspicions of malpractice. And this can cause harm to the individuals involved or the organization as a whole. And when we look at that, it can also cause internal harm due to the misinformation or misinterpretation. And also, those who come forward can face retaliation from the organization, such as losing their jobs, such as even being ostracized within the workplace, and um, things like that, despite them being protected by the law. It can also violate the pro tanto moral duty, which is an obligation which is usually upheld except for extraordinary circumstances. So when this breach has happened, the whistleblower actions can have a negative light even when they are acting out of sense of like moral obligation. Additionally, whistleblowing can also compromise the privacy of the individual's involvement, as confidential information may become public, as stated, even though the law states certain measures that safeguard the whistleblower. Sometimes things may happen and confidentiality may be broken. It can also affect the corporate culture and potentially foster an environment of suspicion and fear rather than trust and transparency, which are very important pillars within an organization. And lastly, one of the biggest things that come to whistleblowing is moral dilemma. So having to choose between being loyal and the need to act ethically and align with your values and the company values, which can lead to um, personal and professional conflict. So, just to bring the presentation together, I'd like to discuss the one well-known whistleblower known as Dr. Li Wenliang. So Dr. Li Wenliang was unfortunately was an um, ophthalmologist in Wuhan, and he's the one who raised alarms when COVID-19 came out. At the time, he did not know it was COVID-19, but there were so many patients coming into his to see him who had pneumonia-like symptoms, and he privately messaged his fellow medics in 2019 to warn them of this very, 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 very infectious disease that was going rampant. Initially, he was unfortunately criticized and admonished by the government due to rumor mongering and scaring the public of what at the time they were saying was an issue. Um, but shortly after, because he brought this up in December 2019, and shortly after it became such a big issue in Wuhan where it started. And unfortunately, he himself succumbed to the virus in just 2 months later in February 2020. Um, After he was hailed as a hero because his actions promoted both national and international disclosure of importance of whistleblowing protections, especially in the public health emergencies. And when we look at a situation like that, you can think about how much, um, how if that was taken seriously and if he was protected as a whistleblower, um, how the disease, even within Wuhan, would be taken care of in the most effective way possible to avoid spreading from happening at the rates that it did. So we have come to the end of the presentation. So just to sum the whole thing up, we have looked at a comparison of whistleblowing frameworks of the United States, United Kingdom, and Canada. It shows that there are very many similarities between the frameworks and also some few distinct differences, um, which all protect within like the legal jurisdictions, protect the individuals who disclose wrongdoing. Um, they also show we also looked at the varying definition, excuse me, the varying definitions and legal requirements in the procedural steps. Um, the US emphasizes just a brief um, catch up is the US emphasizes the disclosure by federal employees of violation of law or gross mismanagement backed by legislation within the Whistleblower Protection Act. And then in contrast, we can see the UK adopts the tiered approach that we discussed, internal then external, and then which is within the Public Interest Disclosure Act. And then next we see the Canada's framework, which focuses primarily on the public sector and has a balance between freedom of expression and loyalty, which is outlined in the Public Servants Disclosure Protection Act. Despite these differences, as stated, the frameworks all um, um, show a commitment to transparency, accountability within organizations, to be ethical, um, to themselves, to the society, and to everyone else involved. Um, yes, that is the end of my presentation. The final slide shows the references um, of the resources that are cited throughout this presentation. Thank you.